Captain DePete, President Nelson, you are now live.
Thank you.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome. It's a real pleasure to be here with Captain Joe DePete, President of the Airline Pilots Association. My name is Sara Nelson. I'm President of the Association of Flight Attendants, CWA. And of course, we are showing unity right now with you, both in the cockpit and in the cabin. But we are, when we talk about this, we're talking about being in unity with every single transportation union. And in the airline industry, we are 80% organized. So we have had an experience with crisis before in the airline industry. We've had all the ups and downs throughout the years. And of course, we have also seen the fallout of those crises, bankruptcies, then mergers, and it's always falling on the workers' backs to pick up the pieces. When management comes and goes, we are the stable. And so we took all of that experience together and made sure that we wanted to say this time, this is not going to be put on our backs. So we got the first Workers First package ever in the CARES Act in March. And that made sure that this was focused on our jobs, our pay, our benefits, keeping our airlines intact. So that payroll support program that we got was historic, but it has also given us the ability to fight forward now. Everyone thought in March that by now we'd be in a very different position with coronavirus, having it much more contained, having our economy start up again this fall. And that is just not where we are. That's not where we find ourselves. In fact, things are so bad that our airlines are only running about 25% of what they were a year ago. And American Airlines just announced this morning that they're going to start service cuts to some of those smaller communities, cutting off vital services right now in the middle of this pandemic. That is also related to our payroll support program. And you, all of you out there, pilots and flight attendants and other aviation workers, have done a tremendous job of getting Congress's attention on this. And we are well poised to get an extension of our payroll support program, but we need a big relief bill to have the legislative vehicle to get that done. So I want to introduce to you my good friend, Joe DePete, to also share a few opening thoughts with you.
Absolutely, Sarah. Thank you so much. And thank you to everybody who's viewing today. I couldn't agree with you more. We realized at ALPA very early on that we were on our own and we had to fall back on what created our union in the first place, right? It was relying on one another. But you're right, it was a major achievement for workers that we were able to get together and pass the most extensive pro-worker legislation ever in history, and we need to do it again. So I am just super delighted to be here today and join you, Sarah. And as we continue to fight for our frontline aviation workers who are doing their jobs today, even, I might note, as Congress and the White House are failing to do theirs, right? It's absolutely, I feel like it's absolutely critical that lawmakers and the White House return to the table and extend relief for hundreds of thousands of pilots, flight attendants, and other aviation workers who face potential furlough as a result of the COVID-19 economic downturn. Unless Congress acts to provide a financial backstop when the CARES Act payroll support program expires on October the 1st, pilots and other airline employees will be forced to empty their savings, drain their retirements, delay seeking health care, and sacrifice their children's future. Adding to this personal financial devastation, failing to prevent aviation sector workers from losing their jobs will drain the US economy as well as state and federal resources. In addition, the essential role that airlines play in fueling the global economy and supporting the US military is threatened without government relief, as is our industry's contribution to transporting American goods and services to support commerce and trade around the globe. Beyond airline employees' economic contribution, we also support the people and the communities of this country. And you mentioned that. During this pandemic, airline pilots have brought US citizens home, connected healthcare workers, equipment, and supplies to pandemic hotspots, and provided essential transportation for people in small and medium-sized communities that are now threatened by service reductions without a federal bridge to get our industry through the worst of this pandemic. Our members and the flying public have sent nearly 250,000 messages to Capitol Hill, urging lawmakers to extend the payroll support program through March 31st. Pilots from Texas to Florida have also sent nearly 100,000 tweets calling on their elected representatives to kickstart the recovery for the airline industry while sharing their stories, their personal stories, on social media. Lawmakers from both sides of the political aisle have acknowledged the importance of continued economic relief for aviation workers, and 16 Republican senators and even a bipartisan majority of the House members have backed extending airline payroll support. Even President Trump announced his support for a clean extension of the Payroll Support Program. See if he follows through. Yet we have no agreement, and time is now running out. So the Payroll Support Program expires again on October 1st. Airline pilots and other workers who've helped build the U.S. airline industry are really running out of time. So to revive our economy, the United States needs a strong airline industry, and a strong airline industry requires a strong unionized workforce, the strong workforce. The more than 63,000 members of the Airline Pilots Association need Congress, and we need you and the White House to act now to restart talks and extend the Payroll Support Program through March 31st of 2021. And with that, all right, I hand it back over to you.
So Joe, yeah, you're so right. And here's what I want everyone to know. Here's where we are. And Joe just talked about it. We enjoy tremendous support in the Senate. This was a Democratic proposal coming from Leader Schumer and Nancy Pelosi. There were 16 Republican senators who in 24 hours signed a letter in support of a clean extension of our payroll support program. And they're doing that for several reasons. They're doing that because for every job lost right now, for every job available, 5 Americans are seeking that job. We have over 53 million people who have filed for unemployment. That unemployment plus up of $600 was also supporting another 5 million jobs that will be lost. The funding that we need for our state and local communities to continue public transportation, sanitation during a pandemic, keeping our rural hospitals open. That money supports another 5.3 million jobs that we'll lose. So these Republican senators support our payroll support program because jobs are an extreme importance to our economy. We have to have people continue to be able to spend into our economy. And so they supported that because of our jobs and also because of the service to our communities that is so critical. We've heard so much about the post office right now. The post office delivers mail to these rural communities in the belly of our aircraft. If they don't have that aircraft flying to those communities, there are people who are cut off from vital medicines that they get through the mail. This is really serious. It's a crisis, and it's a crisis like no other. So we need to throw out everything we knew before and focus on the things that work. And the good news is that our payroll support program is the most effective jobs program of all of coronavirus relief. It is the best use of the public's money because it keeps our airlines intact, a vital service during this pandemic. It keeps us in a place where we are not moving to bankruptcies that can lead to further consolidation, hurt both workers and consumers, and not allow our airlines to be able to compete with the rest of the world on the other side of this pandemic. So this payroll support program, even though it's about stopping these involuntary furloughs, as Joe knows and Joe has said, this supports flight attendants and pilots and other aviation workers at every area of our careers, every single area of our careers. And Joe, you have said it to me before, these voluntary programs that help to try to mitigate some of the hurt, those are not truly voluntary. That's with a gun to our heads. And so we need to make sure that we have the best program that is proven now and continue it because we are not through this crisis yet. No. So we're going to go. So here's what we want you to know. The good news is Nancy Pelosi is calling the House back this weekend. Right. The leadership has continued to stay in Washington, can reach a deal any day. Any day they can reach a deal. This idea that nothing's going to happen until September is not correct. And we can't entertain it for a second because every day that goes on, there is more and more hurt and the bill for recovery gets higher and higher. So we have to demand action now. So all of your calls, your emails, everything that you have been doing is forcing the House back into session this weekend. Mitch McConnell has said that he can call the Senate back within 24 hours, and we need him to do that. The committees and the staffers that do their work on this relief bill have continued to meet. This is totally possible. It's the right thing to do, and we just have to push it over the top.
I agree wholeheartedly. Totally. I think people in your audience, I'm sure it gets this as essential workers, many of them, is, we're talking not just our industry, right? Our industry affects so many other industries, and you're talking at least, an impact of over 10 million people in jobs that rely on this industry to survive, right? Not to mention the fact of the important part about the military aspects that I mentioned, the fact that we're bringing, we've got pilots going into harm's way, into Guangzhou, China, bringing back essential, PPE equipment and ventilators and all these kinds of things. And it's just, there's a reason why we're considered to be essential employees. We provide an essential service. This impact will be so great. If we do not get Congress to act, it will be so great. You think about all the things that you mentioned about the state and local communities, the impact already, the unemployment rolls are so high. Can you imagine it would be a real shame to take really good jobs and just add to that pressure, right? I mean, I don't see how it works. And honestly, I think it's a cliff that we're going to go over and can change the industry for a very, very long time, if not permanently. I mean, that's a mistake. That's
right. And Joe, at the end of the day, when we recover, we need people to be able to afford to buy airplane tickets.
Exactly.
We need this relief bill for us, and we need it for the whole country so that we can support our industry going forward. So at ALPA.org and at AFA-CWA.org, there's actions that you can take there, easy email actions. There's numbers for calling Congress. There's tweets, as you said, Joe, that people can use and tweet at their representatives, which is a really good way to take action. And we've also been putting together some actions at some of these Senate and representative offices out in their local offices to say, come on, let's get the job done. We need relief right now. So we have some questions coming in, Joe. Sure. You want to take some questions?
Absolutely. Let's do it.
Okay. All right. So the first one I have is, what do you say to those who argue airlines and airline workers already received assistance earlier this year and don't need more?
Well, I'd say it was much needed help, and we expected to be in a different place right now, right? But as you know, and you've helped me with this, I think, we were pretty much on our own. The fact that from the federal level, I believe there was such a failure to address the spread of this virus that we should be well far along. And to be quite honest with you, as a pilot, I know this instinctively, okay? It's a restricted environment. We have the ability to control that environment to a very high degree. And that's why ALPA called very early on for a mandate, and why I support Peter DeFazio's Healthy Flight Act, which basically lays out a safe airport, a safe and clean airport, a safe and clean airplane, a safe and clean crew, and passengers taking normal precautions. So we can get it to the point where it's safer to go to the airport and get on an aircraft. That's the way it should be right now. We should be the example. We know how to do this. We do it all the time, but we could use a little help. And that's where to rely on industry to take a role like this on their own is resulting in a patchwork. I mean, there's some good players out there. Some people have really tried to do what they can, and now they're starting to see the light as well, which is a good thing because we're not where we should be. So this is critical legislation that we need, and if not, it's going to get much worse. The economy will get much worse.
Yes, and you mentioned Chairman DeFazio, the chairman of the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee, who is such a good friend to ALPA and to AFA and all transportation workers. And he is the one who put forward the original Payroll Support Program for us. And so we need to know who our champions are. But also, Joe, you make a really important point. We have to get this Payroll Support Program in place because we can't allow the financial stress to interfere with the good safety decisions that have to be made and the good safety protocols that have to be in place. So getting this financial assistance in place is also supporting the framework to make those good safety decisions too.
I couldn't agree more. It's directly linked to improving the confidence of the flying public that it's safe to come back on an airplane. And people ask me that all the time, is it safe? And I said, well, if it left the gate, the great thing about flying is you get a pilot in command, you get a flight crew, right? Flight attendant, flight crew, that actually give it the thumbs up on that day, the flight that you're on. It's so personal. Well, on your flight, making a decision based on the operational factors of your flight on that day. It doesn't get any better than that. But we need some help from the federal level for sure.
Yes. So I think this looks like a question from the press. I think we have some members of the press watching this, even though this is intended for our members, but
Okay.
So they say, what will happen to your members in the airline industry if Congress fails to act?
Well, yeah, it's pretty obvious. I mean, thank God, we started a pilot peer support program a while ago. The stress is very high on families. They're looking to lose their livelihoods, healthcare, issues like that, especially in the regional world. I know the regionals suffer a great deal. But the real sad part about this for a country that really created the aviation industry, pioneers, is that we may do some really significant damage here. If that many pilots hit the streets, they don't just throw the keys at us and say, okay, come back and fly. I mean, the impact of those layoffs, pilot training, leakage for pilots who may go and do something else. This really could hamstring the growth of the rebound of the industry and the growth of the economy. It's going to make the recovery even more protracted than it already is.
Yeah, and I think it's also important to note that we've talked about the hundreds of thousands of jobs that are on the line if we don't get this federal funding. But what that doesn't also include is the decisions that people are having to make. So these cuts to these small communities, we know there's pilots and flight attendants who commute from those communities who won't be able to get to work. We know that there are people who are going back on reserve who have been line holders before. And what that means for them is they've got to get closer to the airport. That means that, for example, a friend of mine flying for 20 years, right? And his greatest joy is to rescue dogs. He's got 3 dogs that he loves. And he's having to think about giving those dogs away to someone else, possibly having to send them back to a shelter, because he is having to make a decision to move out of the place where he can support them and into a place closer to the airport so he can continue to do his job. Now, this has a ripple effect. That's just one story. We also have a story of a flight attendant who is in jeopardy of losing her health insurance. And that means that she could fall out of line for her husband to get a heart transplant. It's literally people's lives on the line here. And the ripple effect is enormous. After 9/11, we went to other things. Flight attendants went and, some pilots went and worked at Home Depot, as you know, which wasn't necessarily a great option, but we went and did other things. There were other jobs that we could go to and we got trained for new things. The problem is there's nowhere to go here. And so this hurt is just going to run so deep and we can't let it happen. And once again, I just want to interject this again. Our payroll support program, if it went to the floor of the Congress right now, it would pass. And that is why we cannot let up for a second on demanding that they get this relief done. It is absurd that everyone understands, everyone agrees that this should be done and that they're not actually coming to a larger relief deal and getting it done. Absolutely. So there we go. Okay, the next one is the flying public trusts flight attendants and pilots with their lives every time they board a flight. What can the flying public do to support you and your livelihoods?
Well, first of all, be aware. And I think we need to consistently, like you said, we need to double down on this message, right? They need to understand what the true impact of losing this industry is and having so many good employees, be furloughed. Listen, ALPA.org, your organization, there's a means by which to be heard. Every American should be picking up the phone and asking some questions about this and calling their lawmakers and compelling them to act. There's a lot at stake here. And I have a feeling that when people realize what it might be, if they let it go too far, it will really be an ugly recovery.
That's right. And so members of the public are welcome to come to either one of our sites, ALPA.org or AFA-CWA.org. And you can join right in. It looks like it's just an action for pilots or flight attendants, but there's an opening for any member of the public to take action as well. And we welcome that. And for those of you who are pilots or flight attendants or other aviation workers, you should be encouraging your friends and families to take action at these sites as well.
Exactly. All the workers that are out there watching right now, if you're part of a union, fantastic. Let your voice be heard. If you're not part of a union, what are you waiting for? If this isn't a perfect example of why you need representation, nothing is. This is a black swan event. I don't think we've seen anything quite so devastating as this. And I could only imagine if we didn't have the structure, the union structure that we have right now, to have our voices heard, where this country would be right now. So
that's right.
Act.
That's right.
Act. You have to act. You have to vote. You have to act. You have to participate. That's what.
And let me note, Joe, those flight attendants at Delta who want a union have been acting too.
Gotcha.
They've been running phone banks every single day. Instead of doing their organizing drive, they're pushing people to their senators to act and make sure that.
As they should. Welcome. Welcome.
Thanks. Then we have a question. I think we've answered this, but let's just put a fine point on it. Do you really think Congress can get a payroll support program extension done before October 1st?
No, you addressed that. Absolutely, they can. No brainer. But they need to hear from us. They need to continue to hear.
That's
and
right.
You know what compels them to act. And the more voices, the better. If we could do 250,000 letters, I'm sure that if we can motivate the public and direct them to our websites and make them understand, look at our issues that are posted on the websites, and clear. It's so clear. So yes, act.
And we need to double down and do that again right now, because I want to remind everybody, the House is being called back this weekend.
Yes,
that means we can get this done. Mitch McConnell has said it'll only take 24 hours to get the Senate back. We can get this done, and we have to get it done. We have to get it done.
Right.
How will extending the payroll support program help senior flight attendants and pilots?
Well, you actually touched on this a little bit too. Everybody's affected by this. Just because you're one that didn't get furloughed, the way our system works, and you mentioned, senior, which reflects seniority, right? Quality of life is going to significantly change for a lot of people. All right. In our industry too, it's very easy as they rejigger all the manning levels that we're going to have people slide down into lower paying positions. This really has a lot of tentacles to it. So no, you're not safe if you just survived.
Right. And I want to remind people, Joe, too, that the payroll support program has some very important components to it. So no involuntary furloughs, no reduction in pay rates, no stock buybacks, no dividends, and a cap on executive compensation as well. And then the continuation to all of our communities. So all of those things are in place, and all of those things touch every single flight attendant and pilot at any area of the seniority list. And we also know too, those of us who've been around for a while, that when the airline industry is unstable, that typically tends to affect all of us. And so we're just not going to let that happen again. Let's see, as a line flight attendant or pilot, what's the most effective action we can do to help?
Well, act, do something. Really, let your voice be heard. Last I looked, this is still the United States of America, and we're allowed to do that, I think. Sometimes questionable, but I think we need to be heard. We need to be heard, and this is the vehicle to do it. So, just thinking about it at home and hoping it works out is not the key. The key is to now be heard and make this happen. So act.
Yeah, we can do this, Joe. We can do this. If anyone can do it, flight attendants and pilots can do it. And flight attendants and pilots know that in an emergency, seconds count.
Absolutely.
And so we have to take that same kind of urgency with the care that we have for the passengers, with their safety, health, and security. And we have to demand that of Congress, to say that is your mandate for the entire American people. So get to work, get the job done, relief now. We can absolutely do that. Again, ALPA.org, AFA-CWA.org. And I think there's probably some notes in this Facebook Live posting too, where you can take action. Right. But we really need everyone taking action. And don't throw your hands up and say, oh, they never do it, because the action that you have taken already has caused Nancy Pelosi to call the House back.
Right.
and made Mitch McConnell have to note that he can call back the Senate in 24 hours. So
Yes.
double down and take action. And we can do this together. We are organized. We are strong. We got it done the first time, and we've got to get it done again.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more.
So
Well said.
thank you for joining us, everybody. And once again, I'm just very, very proud to be here with my friend and brother, Captain Joe DePete, president of the Airline Pilots Association. The Association of Flight Attendants really enjoys an amazing relationship with our counterparts in the flight deck. And together we are a really powerful force. So let's stand together, everyone, support each other, call Congress and say relief now. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.